Hello, and welcome to another episode of Shattered Lives, the Irish Daily Star and Irish Mirror's crime podcast. I'm crime and defence editor Michael O'Toole, and joining me today is our crime correspondent Paul Healy. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Mick.
So we sort of changed chairs yesterday and the day before. I was at the trial of Jozef Puska, and you were back at base, shall we say, but we swapped seats. So you were at the trial today, and I'm back at home.
Yes, and now I'm here sitting in my car at the side of the road, like you were yesterday. It's an interesting new format for our pods.
It is. So let's get into what we call in journalism the anchor paragraph, which is a very important paragraph that we have to get through. So we're at the trial of Jozef Puska, who is 33 and a Slovakian national with an address at Linani Grove in Muckla in County Offaly, and he is currently on trial for the murder of Ashling Murphy. Miss Murphy, who was 23, died after she was assaulted on the Grand Canal Way at Cappincur, Tullamore, on the 12th of January last year. The Mr Puska denies the charge. He is on trial at the Central Criminal Court in front of Mr Justice Tony Hunt and a jury of 3 women and 9 men. Now, this is the third day. We're calling it day 3. It's actually the second day of evidence. The first day was the arraignment of Mr Puska and the jury selection. And as you know, Mr Puska denied, when the arraignment was put to him, he denied the murder of Ashling Murphy. So we're going to get into the trial, what happened today, but just a couple of things. Firstly, as Paul said yesterday, we are going to be talking about some adult and sensitive issues, I suppose. So just a small trigger or content warning about that. And the other piece of housekeeping, just thanks to one of our listeners who corrected me on an error I made yesterday, and I just want to correct this. I said that Miss Murphy was a teacher at Durrow National School in County Laois. Now, obviously there is a Durrow in County Laois, but the listener kindly pointed out that Miss Murphy taught at Durrow in Offaly. And I should know that because I can remember being at Miss Murphy's school after the death. So thanks very much for our listener for contacting me about that. We really do appreciate the feedback, and we're not precious at all. Mistakes happen, but we do appreciate people contacting us via DM or public or whatever, just keeping us honest, shall we say. So thanks very much for the listener. So Paul, today I understand from your fantastic tweets, I was following them avidly, that there were 8 witnesses who gave evidence today in the trial of Mr Puska.
Yes, multiple witnesses today, starting with Detective Sergeant Paul Curran. So he was attached to the photographic section there of An Garda Síochána. And then we went into, which we'll speak about in more detail in a minute, several witnesses who were walking or in the area around the Grand Canal there in Tullamore in Offaly on the day that Miss Murphy was killed.
Yes, and they will, and as we'll go through them in a moment, they give direct evidence of seeing certain things and reacting in certain ways. But just, I do think it's important that we do mention, however briefly, every witness. So we'll talk about Paul Curran very briefly. He, as you say, he's a detective sergeant, I think, in the ballistics section of An Garda Síochána, and he was there taking photographs of the scene after the death of Miss Murphy on the 12th of January last year.
Yes, indeed. And look, this is a difficult one to describe as such because it is what it is. The detective sergeant was going through a number of photographs that he had taken of the scene day of and day after there in Tullamore. And basically he was describing, we didn't see the photographs, but the jury sees the photographs, but he was describing, when asked by the prosecution, what he was taking a photograph of. And there's mention of a blue tent, which is the crime scene tent, and then just various angles of the scene up and down the canal there near the bridge, which is where this happened in Cappincur. And he was basically just describing the layout of the land. There's thick brambles there, and you can see the canal and the hedging, and just giving you kind of a general sense of what the scene was.
And I also understand from your tweets, Paul, that they used a drone to take pictures or video as well.
Yes, there was mention of drone photographs as well. So photos from above, photos of from every angle of this scene and its vicinity.
Okay, so he wasn't on the stand for very long, but I think the next witness after Detective Sergeant Curran was on for quite a while, and that was a lady called Jenna Stack.
Yes. Now, Miss Stack's evidence went on for some time, and there's a lot of detail in it because Miss Stack is a witness in this case who well, she witnessed a lot, so she had a lot of evidence to give. So Miss Stack is a primary school teacher. She's a primary school teacher in the Muckla area, and she told the court that she was basically on the on the afternoon of the 12th of January 2022, going out for a run. She decided to meet her friend Aoife to go out for a 7 kilometer run there. Which is not easy for in my opinion, but they described it as a short run, but a tough going run, a 7 kilometer run there up and down the canal towards Cappincur. So they planned to meet at 3:10, and according to her watch, she had it set for the run at 3:15 there in the afternoon, and the two of them set about on their run down the canal.
And she says from your tweets and the evidence that there was something that caught her eye first of all.
Yes, so the first thing that caught her eye, as she explained to the court, was a luminous green bike. So she saw this luminous green bike pushed down in the hedgerow, basically, and she thought that it looked very unusual. She thought it was a nice bike, and it was strange that someone would leave such a nice bike there. The quote from her I have here, she said, "Jesus, that's Aoife, that's a really nice bike. I wonder what it's doing there." But they continued on their run after that. It didn't startle them as such to the point where they stopped at that point.
Yeah, and then I believe her friend Aoife Marion, who's going to give evidence, you'll be talking about her in a while, but Miss Marion stepped forward when they heard a bit of rustling in the undergrowth beside the bike.
Yeah, so as Miss Stack explained, they heard this rustling in the hedgerow. She described it as quite distinctive. And so they moved to have a closer look herself and Aoife. And she said that it wasn't like an animal. It was quite distinct. It was loud. It was like somebody was struggling, to be honest, she said. And she thought, I suppose naturally the assumption, you see the bike, they said they thought at that point that someone had fallen off the bike and gone into the brambles. So Miss Stack then described what she saw. So she went and she had a look in, and she told the court that she could see the back of a jacket, a navy kind of bomber type jacket, padded jacket. And she shouted in something to the effect of, "Are you okay?" To the man. She could only see the back of him, as she said. And then this person turned around, and she said she could see his face, couldn't see his hands, but she said he was holding someone down. He turned around, and I said, "What are you doing?" And at that point, he spoke to me and he said, "Get away." She said this man's teeth were gritted, and he had a kind of a facial expression that was quite terrifying, she said. She was asked then by the prosecuting counsel, Miss Anne-Marie Lawler, just to kind of give a description of the man that she saw. And she said that he had stubble on his face, appeared to have a receding hairline, or as though he had shaved his head, and that she remembered his eyebrows were quite distinct, she said. Go ahead.
Sorry, and then I think her next evidence would be that she could see what she said. She saw a woman underneath the man. I think that was the word she used.
Yes, she could see a woman lying down underneath him, and he appeared to be on top of her. He said he was crouched over her, holding her down. His face, his teeth were kind of grinding as he shouted, "Get away!" to her. But she could clearly see a second person underneath. She saw her thighs, she said. And she would go on to tell the court that she could see this lady, who the court accepts was, of course, Ashling Murphy. She could see her legs kicking in a scissors-like motion, and she appeared to be struggling, she said.
And that word, she did use the word scissors, which would convey sort of activity, very, very actively trying to move from the scene where she was.
Yeah, so she said, I just have the quote here, she said her legs, she was kicking so hard, she was crying out for help. She was kicking like a scissors. She was moving with whatever part of her body that she could. At that point, when I saw what was happening, I thought, this guy is going to rape her, to be honest. I said to him, "I have my phone with me. I'm calling the guards. Get off her." Now, Ms. Stack gave evidence in court that she actually didn't have her phone on her at this point in time. So she told the man this in the hope that it would in some way startle him, but she didn't have a phone on us. She then said that this man lunged. He kind of lunged as if to frighten us. And she said the whole incident lasted about 30 seconds, and they just ran as fast as they could to get help. And they ran in the opposite direction towards the bridge.
So I understand that she would have come across a man in a high-vis jacket. It was the first person that she came in contact with, but there wasn't a very fast reaction from that man. So then she went and I think, did she go to a house? Was it the house next door? Did she meet two other men?
Yeah, so they had an interaction with two men at the bridge in which they asked for help. We'll come back to that because there were evidence from both of those men. And they looked for help. They tried to contact the guards. They were unable to do so. So herself and Aoife both split. And she went to a house of someone that she knew, a relative of a relative, and Aoife went to another house. Aoife was actually the one that managed to dial 999, I believe, first and get onto the guards. So she went to a friend's house, essentially, nearby.
And I understand that then Michael Bowman, senior counsel for Mr Puska, started cross-examining her, and I think he accepted, or he said that the man that she saw, that she was speaking to, was Mr Puska himself. But I think it's interesting that he said that in evidence, or he said to Miss Stack, that Mr Puska was not being aggressive, but was in pain, having cut himself.
Yes. Now, I'm limited as to how I can describe this moment in court, but I just want to explain that I was in the overflow court for this, and you're taking notes as much as you can. Mr. Bowman was going through cross-examination quite procedurally, but when it came to this point, I suppose we can just say that it is interesting that he got into I suppose effectively, and he is there to defend his client, so it's not a shock, but he got into, I suppose, what is his client's defense in this case. So we heard this information for the first time, in that he says that it is his client's position, Mr. Puska, that is, that it was him on top of Ashling Murphy, but that at this point in time he was endeavouring to find out what had happened, and that he was, quote, trying to assist Miss Murphy at that point in time. He put that to Miss Stack, could that be a possibility? And Miss Stack said something to the effect of, well, no, she didn't think so. And if that were the case, he could have asked us for help. Because she points out that this man was aggressive towards her and told her to get away, and that she was frightened of him. And she had asked him to she had said to him that she was going to call the guards. Now, Mr. Bowman said his client, as limited as his English may be, if he heard the word police or if he heard the word guard, he would know what that means. And he has no recollection of that. But Miss Stack was insistent that this is how she remembers events, and it wasn't the impression that she got. She did say she was going to call the guards, and that the events transpired as she said they were. Now, Mr. Bowman also said that his client's position, Mr. Puska's position, is that Miss Murphy was moving at this point in time, but not in the manner that Miss Stack had described, which was kicking her legs like a scissors. So, look, Miss Stack insisted, she just said that is the way she saw things.
And I also understand that Mr. Bowman would have argued that Mr. Puska, his position is he was trying to staunch the bleeding from Miss Murphy's neck. We know that she received 11 stab wounds to the neck. So I think that was put to the client, was put to Miss Stack.
Yes, it was put to Miss Stack that Mr. Puska's position is that he had his forearm on Miss Murphy and that he was trying to stop the bleeding from her neck. And he said to Miss Stack, Mr. Bowman, that is, you didn't see that. And she said no. She said that the only part that she saw was that he was on top of her, and that, she had earlier said, she was challenged on the fact that she had earlier said that he was holding Miss Murphy down. Well, Mr. Bowman said, with due respect, you can't say that Mr. Puska was holding Miss Murphy down, because she had earlier acknowledged, and in her statement acknowledged, that she never saw Mr. Puska's hands. So Mr. Bowman's position is you can't say what he was doing with his hands because you at no stage saw his hands.
So I think that was the end of the cross-examination, but as is allowed, Anne-Marie Lawler, senior counsel, came back in, and it was just what we were talking about earlier about the word scissors. Basically, I think Miss Lawler asked if she made any mistake in her description of Miss Murphy's legs kicking.
Yes, and Miss Stack said that she did not. That was her evidence. That is her recollection of the events. So we had a break then and we came back at 2 o'clock. And of course, we then had to hear from the other woman who was with Miss Stack, and that was Aoife Marin.
Yes, Aoife Marin, and she would have been a friend of Miss Stack, and as you say, they were out jogging together. So she was, I think, she said that she would have been jogging along, and she would have heard these noises that she thought were strange.
Yeah, she gave a similar version of events in that she heard a noise, that she saw the bike, that they went for their run just before 3:15. Now, in her recollection of things, she did not see Miss Murphy. She didn't see a woman. She saw the back of a man's head. And from her recollection, she asked this man, "Are you okay?" And the man said, "Okay, okay." She then recalls Miss Stack going in, as she said she did, and having the interaction with the man in which she said, "I'm going to call the guards." And it was then that Miss Marin said she became frightened. She became terrified that something was really seriously wrong, and she began to run. They both began to run because they were scared. And she actually said that she thought that this man was chasing them, and she was looking behind her the whole time, thinking that this man was pursuing them as they were running.
And after that, she met another witness we'll hear from called Enda Malloy, but then she ran to try and get access to a phone to call 999, basically.
Yeah, so she went to the home of a Tommy Martin, and she said, "I was trying to tell them where I was." Sorry, she went to the phone. She went to the home of Tommy Martin. She called 999, and she said to the guards, "I was trying to tell them where I was and that I thought there was a girl being raped." So then she saw Jenna back in the yard when she came out, and she also just clarified something in relation to what Jenna had told her, because Jenna was the person who told her, that is Miss Stack, that she saw a woman. She thought she was being raped. She said she saw her legs in the air. So Miss Marin was later challenged by that by the defense, by Mr. Bowman. Did you see a woman? No. And did you question your friend's version of events? It was pointed out to her just in the book of evidence and statements that there will be another witness who said that she saw a conversation in which it's alleged basically that Miss Marin asked Miss Stack, "Is that what you saw?" Basically questioning what she saw when she looked into the brambles. And Miss Marin says she can't recall that exact conversation.
So I think the exact phrase is, "I don't know how you seen that," and she said that she can't recall saying that.
Yeah, she can't recall saying that at all. Just in relation to they met two men on the bridge. They were two workers from Waterways Ireland, and they gave their evidence. And there's different kind of versions of how the conversation went down. But effectively, the two women said to these men that they had seen a man on top of a woman. They thought that she was being raped or attacked, and they were basically appealing to these two men to get down there and do something. And it was the gentleman on the bike who was able to get down to the scene first. And apart from Miss Stack, then he would have been the second person to see the body of Ashling Murphy.
Okay, and so the person on the bike, I think, was the next witness, and that's a man called Enda Malloy. So he said he was cycling along, and then he met another man on a bike who I think is a Polish gentleman who also gave evidence today. And they were going. They were. He said he was cycling towards Digby Bridge, which is the bridge just on the canal. And as he was doing that, he met the two runners. He said Aoife Marin, whom he knew, and Jenna Stack, who obviously gave evidence. Yes. And he could see that those two were talking with two men, and there seemed to be an exchange.
Yes, he basically saw the conversation that happened on the bridge, and he saw that he described the conversation as animated, and there was something different, there was something up, and he could see that the two women were distressed, and that they had said something like, "Did you not see the man?" They had described a man with his hand on a girl's mouth, and I think on her throat, is what he said. And so he then cycled back as fast as he could to where the women said this bike was, and he went in there.
So that was at a that was just he stopped at a ditch, basically. He said he stopped at a ditch. That was where the indication had been given to him that there had been an issue happening.
Yes. So Mr. Malloy said he saw something green. He was describing the bike, the luminous green bike. He said he started looking around, and he said, I eventually saw Ashling in the ditch. It was just said to him, you didn't know Ashling Murphy at this point in time. He said, no, I didn't. It is accepted by the court that of course was the body of Miss Murphy. But nonetheless, he saw the body of a woman identified later as being Miss Murphy, and he said she was lying in the ditch in the undergrowth. He was asked to describe in detail what way she was lying, and he said she was lying on her back, face up. But he couldn't see her face. He said her hair was long and it was covering her face. Her face seemed to be turned in the direction of Tullamore, he said, and he just basically got onto the Gardaí then after that.
Okay, and Mr. Bowman asked the witness if, to the best of his knowledge, was there any sign of life on Miss Murphy?
Yeah, and he said there didn't appear to be any signs of life. Now, he didn't touch the body, he didn't go near Miss Murphy at all. He just got onto the guards, but he had shouted out to her, had called out to her, and he got no response.
Okay, so that was that witness. So the next witness was the other cyclist, I believe, Janusz Wilka, who is a Polish national. And there was an interpreter used for Mr. Wilko, I believe, was there?
Yes, there was an interpreter for Mr. Wilko. And basically he gave his version of events, how he met Mr. Malloy, and he went down and he also looked in and could see the body of Miss Murphy. In his case, he said he saw a human leg. That's the way he described it. He also described the conversation at Digby's Bridge and how the women appeared to be distressed. So he backed up that particular version of events.
And he did, and I think one of the first things he said he saw would have been the bicycle lying on the ground, and that was lying as if it had been abandoned, he said, before he found Miss Murphy's body.
Yes, he described the bike, the green luminous bike, lying there, and he described the discussion that he had with Mr. Malloy. And we then got on to Charlie Kelly. He was one of the two Waterways Ireland workers, and he was saying he was initially asked about a description that he gave to the guards. He saw a man fitting the description, so it was pointed out to the court that there was an appeal put out by the guards for a man, and he said that he saw a man fitting that description. So he was working there on the canal that day, and he said he saw a man on a black bicycle with a large jacket at Digby's Bridge. He had a dark jacket, tracksuit bottoms, very distinctive, with a white band down the leg, and he said they were Tommy Hilfiger. So we went into that, and then he described what he did after lunch, which was he got back to kind of power washing, which was what he was doing that day. When the two women came up to him, he said they were very distressed. They were asking for help, and they said that a woman was being attacked. A man was on top of her, and they asked him to call the guards. And he then saw a man on a bike, we understand to be Mr. Malloy, and asked him to get down there because he'd get there quicker, and they legged it down then after him.
But he got to the scene himself, and he saw the bicycle again. So obviously the bicycle is a fixture there that most witnesses who would have gone there would have seen the bicycle.
Yes, and indeed he also saw the body of Miss Murphy. He said that she was in what appeared to be like a GAA tracksuit, club colours, dark navy and blue. She was facing up, her head was facing towards Tullamore, and her face was covered by her hair. He said that one of her legs was kind of suspended on a tree stump, and he said, I knew she was dead. There was very little colour in her hands, and she was snow white.
And under cross-examination by the defence, Mr. Bowman, senior counsel, asked him, is it fair to say that what the girls said to him was alarming?
Yes, and he agreed that it was alarming, and they appeared to be in distress in relation to it. He also he was asked to go into detail about describing Miss Murphy's leg elevation. He said it was elevated to a 45-degree angle, and as far as he was concerned, she had passed away at that stage.
And I think that was the thrust of his evidence, really, was it?
Yeah, and his colleague then, Colin Petit, also gave evidence, very similar sort of evidence. He also described a hat, a pink hat, and a glove on the tarmac, and the bike thrown to the one side. And he looked into the bramble and could see Ashling's body and her hair over her face, and just confirmed that neither he nor his colleague at any point touched Miss Murphy.
So his evidence is very similar. Obviously, Mr. Kelly would have been with him, so it's very, very similar. But then I think, so that was witness number 7, if my notes are correct. So the final witness was a lady called Daisy Gowing, and I understand she was living in Tullamore and was out for a walk with her daughter on the day of the 12th of January last year.
Yes. Now Miss Gowing was just giving evidence in relation to she saw a man on a bike. I suppose this again fitting a description of a man on a luminous green bike, and she described him as being foreign. She was asked, how did you deduce he was foreign? She said she felt he was Eastern European. She basically just described he wasn't particularly large. He was average size. He looked to be in his mid to late 30s. And she said he was white, but not snow white. And she gave a statement to the guards on the 18th of January in relation to that. And Mr. Bowman just asked her, would you have heard about a foreign person on a bike? And she said she might have heard something in the days prior to her making her statement. She said she might have heard something about that on the news. So
Okay.
that effectively was all of our witnesses today in the case.
And we don't do any commentary, so this is effectively a contemporaneous court report, a long court report, and we do think it is important that we talk about every witness, if they have a lot of evidence or a small amount of evidence. This is why you mentioned Detective Sergeant Paul Curran at the start and Miss Gowing there. So that was us for today. I think we're back tomorrow, are we?
Yeah, we're back tomorrow. I just want to say, and I suppose that there's plenty to take away from today, but it is significant to note this, and just want to point out that, a key piece of evidence that we heard today for the first time is an indication of the defence's position in this case, which is that Mr. Puska claims that he was endeavoring to find out what the situation was, and that he was assisting Miss Murphy at the time. That's the first time we've heard that. I suppose we probably will hear more about that as the trial continues. So there'll be more witnesses tomorrow. This trial is going to go on for 5, possibly 6 weeks. So there's plenty more to come.
Okay, and we'll keep you updated. We'll be doing as many pods as we possibly can. I think, as I said, I was there the first 2 days. I think you're going to be there tomorrow, Paul, and I'll probably be back on Friday, and we'll see how we get on. But thanks, Paul. I really enjoyed your tweets. It was very, very comprehensive. And thanks, everybody, for listening. And we'll hopefully see you again tomorrow.
Thank you.